Warning, this fic contains many dark and adult themes. For the full list provided by the author, please check the description below and proceed with caution. Welcome back, this is Veritaserum by Severitus 812, JessalynMichele, Book 3 of Harry Potter and 7 Years of Chaos. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags, and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's get started. Chapter 7, Boggarts and Bemusement. Please put your textbooks away, grab your wands and follow me. Remus smiled at the excited whispers from his first Ravenclaw Gryffindor class as they followed him to the staff room. Ridiculous was a perfect first lesson for the third years to learn. He would have saved it for their final class before Christmas break, as a treat, but when Albus told him that Argus found a boggart in the wardrobe, it seemed to work out much better this way. When they entered the staff room, only Severus was inside, poring over a muggle book with an irritable scowl on his face. As Remus made to close the door behind the class, Severus said, "Leave it open, Lupin. I'd rather not witness this." He got to his feet and strode past the class, his black robes billowing behind him. At the doorway he turned on his heel and said, "Possibly no one's warned you, Lupin, but this class contains Seamus Finnegan. I would advise you not to entrust him with anything difficult, not unless you wish for an explosion." Seamus Finnegan went scarlet, and Remus raised his brows. Apparently Seamus would be his first student of the day. "I was hoping that Seamus would assist me with the first stage of the operation," he said, "and I am sure he will perform it admirably." Seamus' face went, if possible, even redder. Severus curled his lip, but he left, shutting the door with a snap. "Now then," Remus said, beckoning the class toward the end of the room, where he stood beside the wardrobe that gave a sudden wobble, banging off the wall. "Nothing to worry about," said Remus calmly, after noticing the agitated jumps from the class. "There's only a boggart in there." Most of the students seemed to feel that this was something to worry about. Neville Longbottom looked terrified, and Seamus eyed the now rattling doorknob apprehensively. "Boggarts like dark enclosed spaces," Remus said, hoping to implant the creature theory into the students' heads. "Wardrobes, the gap beneath beds, the cupboards under sinks. I once met one that had lodged itself in a grandfather clock. This one moved in yesterday afternoon, and I asked the headmaster if the staff would leave it to give my third years some practice. So the first question we must ask ourselves is, what is a boggart?" Hermione Granger, Harry's Ravenclaw friend from the train, who Remus saw sitting with his odd group every meal, raised her hand immediately. "It's a shape-shifter," she said. "It can take the shape of whatever it thinks will frighten us most." "Couldn't have put it better myself," said Remus. "So the boggart sitting in the darkness within has not yet assumed a form. He does not yet know what will frighten the person on the other side of the door. Nobody knows what a boggart looks like when he is alone, but when I let him out, he will immediately become whatever each of us most fears." "This means," said Professor Lupin, choosing to ignore Neville's small sputter of terror, "that we have a huge advantage over the boggart before we begin. Have you spotted it, Lavender?" Lavender Brown, a Gryffindor girl, looked hesitantly at Hermione before answering. Maybe because there are so many of us, it won't know what shape it should be." "Precisely," Remus praised her. "It's always best to have company when you're dealing with a boggart. He becomes confused. Which should he become, a headless corpse or a flesh-eating slug? I once saw a boggart make that very mistake, tried to frighten 2 people at once and turned himself into half a slug. Not remotely frightening. The charm that repels a boggart is simple, yet it requires force of mind. You see, the thing that really finishes a boggart is laughter. What you need to do is force it to assume a shape that you find amusing. We will practice the charm without wands first. After me, please. Ridiculous." "Ridiculous," said the class together. "Good," said Professor Lupin. "Very good, but that was the easy part, I'm afraid. You see, the word alone is not enough, and this is where you come in, Seamus." The wardrobe shook again, though not as much as Seamus, who walked swallowed hard before walking up beside Remus. "Right, Seamus," said Remus. "First things first, what would you say is the thing that frightens you most in the world?" Seamus turned bright red once again, and closed his eyes briefly before whispering something inaudible. "Sorry, Seamus, I didn't catch that," Remus said cheerfully. "Don't be embarrassed, everyone's fears will be shown today." Seamus took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling as he muttered, "Potter." "Harry, your classmate Harry Potter?" Remus asked, wondering if perhaps there were another Potter in the student's life that terrified him. Seamus nodded. Remus blinked heavily at Seamus for a moment. He glanced at the class and saw that nobody had laughed, save for a giggling Hermione Granger, which must mean it wasn't a joke. "All right then," he said, deeply hoping that the boggart that emerged did not take the shape of his best friend's son. "Can you think of a way to make Mr. Potter less scary and more amusing?" Seamus stood and thought for a moment before shaking his head. "What on earth?" "I'll help you," Remus said, bemused. He looked around the room for inspiration. What if Mr. Potter was wearing Miss Parvati Patil's dress and hair ornament? A few students chuckled at that, and Seamus nodded slowly. "Yeah, that would be funny, I suppose," he said. "Right then," said Remus. "Can you picture those clothes very clearly, Seamus? Can you see them in your mind's eye?" "Yes," said Seamus uncertainly, plainly wondering what was coming next. "When the boggart bursts out of this wardrobe, Seamus, and sees you, it will assume the form of Mr. Potter," said Remus. "And you will raise your wand thus and cry ridiculous, and concentrate hard on Miss Patil's clothes. If all goes well, Mr. Boggart Potter will be forced into that red dress and golden hair ornament." There was a great shout of laughter, though Remus saw that neither Hermione nor Neville appeared even remotely amused. In fact, Hermione was glaring rather darkly at Seamus and Remus both. The wardrobe wobbled more violently. "If Seamus is successful, the boggart is likely to shift his attention to each of us in turn," Remus told the class. "I would like all of you to take a moment now to think of the thing that scares you most, and imagine how you might force it to look comical." The room went quiet as Remus hoped the students were imagining their fears. He gave them a couple of minutes until most of the students were nodding and looking eager. "Everyone ready?" Remus called. "Seamus, we're going to back away," Remus said as the students began rolling their sleeves up in preparation. "Let you have a clear field, all right. I'll call the next person forward. Everyone back now, so Seamus can get a clear shot." They all retreated, backed against the walls, leaving Seamus alone in front of the wardrobe. He looked pale, but he had pushed up the sleeves of his robes and was holding his wand steady. "On the count of 3 then, Seamus," said Remus, pointing his own wand at the handle of the wardrobe. 1, 2, 3 now." Remus shot an unlocking spell at the wardrobe door handle with a jet of sparks. The wardrobe burst open. Despite Remus' hopes, a small, skinny and scarred Harry Potter stepped out. He had a cruel smirk on his face as he stepped towards Seamus. Remus thought this might be the oddest boggart he'd ever witnessed, and that included Peter's fear of being eaten alive by a chimera. Seamus backed away, reaching his empty hand up to rub at his shoulder. Harry reached into his trouser pocket, still smirking cruelly at Seamus. "Ridiculous!" Seamus roared, his eyes hard. There was a noise like a whip crack. Harry stumbled. He was wearing a red dress, the same gold hair ornament as Miss Patil, and even had on what appeared to be lipstick. There was a roar of laughter, from everyone aside from Hermione or Neville. The boggart paused, confused, and Remus shouted, "Lavender, forward." Lavender stepped forward, biting her lower lip. Boggart Harry turned to her, and with a crack, there was a giant Nundu, breathing its toxic breath in Lavender's direction. Thank Merlin it was Harry again, Remus thought with relief. Harry had seemed much colder and more cynical than James had been at his age, but if the Daily Prophet was to be believed, then Harry had earned that right. Remus just wasn't sure how he'd earned the pleasure of being Seamus Finnegan's worst fear. "Ridiculous," Lavender said, flicking her wand just the way Remus himself had. The Nundu squeaked and sat down on its hind legs, panting like a dog. "Very good," Remus praised her. "Parvati now." Parvati walked up, her face set. The now docile Nundu rounded on her. There was another crack, and where the Nundu had stood was now a blood-stained, bandaged mummy. The mummy's sightless face was turned to Parvati, and it began to walk toward her very slowly, dragging its feet, its stiff arms rising. "Ridiculous!" cried Parvati. A bandage unraveled at the mummy's feet. It became entangled, fell face forward, and its head rolled off. "Excellent, Hermione." Hermione stepped forward, and the mummy turned to her before turning into Albus Dumbledore. "There's been a mistake, Miss Granger," Boggart Albus said harshly. "You aren't a witch after all, you're expelled." "Ridiculous," Hermione yelled, looking disproportionately angry. Albus' beard abruptly burnt up, and he stood there looking rather ridiculous with his chin, now bald and shining. Remus chuckled just a little at the sight. "Wonderful, Padma now." Remus was interested to see that, although it took her slightly longer to dispel it. Padma shared the same fear as Parvati. He wondered if it was a twin thing, or if they had a shared childhood trauma involving a mummy. Crack, the banshee turned into a rat, which chased its tail in a circle, then, crack, became a rattlesnake, which slithered and writhed before crack, becoming a single bloody eyeball. "It's confused," shouted Lupin. "We're getting there, only a few more, Dean now." Dean hurried forward. Crack, the eyeball became a severed hand, which flipped over and began to creep along the floor like a crab. "Ridiculous," yelled Dean. There was a snap, and the hand was trapped in a mousetrap. "Excellent, Neville, you next." Neville leapt forward. Crack. Severus Snape. One 13-year-old student, one headmaster, and one potions professor. What has been going on in this castle? "Get out," Boggart Snape hissed. "Do you really think I care about finding?" "RRR ridiculous," Neville stammered, interrupting whatever his Boggart had been about to taunt him with. Boggart Snape was now strutting around in a vulture-stuffed hat, green frock, and carrying a large red purse. Remus' lips twitched at the sight, despite his best efforts to remain neutral. "You're a dunderhead," Boggart Snape now drawled. "You're all dunderheads." Remus had no idea why Neville found this phrase amusing, but the boy gave a weak laugh and retreated back to Hermione Granger's side. "Everyone's safe now," she whispered to Neville, too quietly for the students to hear but seemingly loud to Remus' sensitive hearing. "You know he's here." "What if he hadn't found him, though?" Neville whispered back. "I'd just be a loser all by myself." "He did, though," Hermione squeezed Neville's hand. "You're not a loser, and you wouldn't have lost the rest of us. We're all your friends, not just Harry." "Thanks, Hermione," Neville whispered with a smile. Remus couldn't even begin to interpret that conversation. "Anthony, come finish it off," Remus said to the quiet Ravenclaw boy standing as far away from the boggart as he could. He thought that his head might actually split open from a headache when the posturing Severus instantly transformed into a Harry who was hissing like a snake. 2 for Harry, 1 for Albus, and 1 for Severus. "Ridiculous," Anthony said softly, though strongly enough to put Harry back in Parvati Patil's dress for a split second before crack. The boggart stumbled down and curled in a ball. Remus easily picked it up and shoved it back in the wardrobe to use again for his other defense class. "Excellent," Remus praised the class, despite his own confusion. "Well done, everyone. Let me see. 5 points to every person who was able to tackle the boggart today, 10 for Seamus because he went first, and 5 extra to Hermione and Lavender for answering my questions correctly. Very well, everyone, an excellent lesson. Homework, kindly read the chapter on boggarts and summarize it for me, to be handed in on Monday. That will be all." As the students left the staff room, whispering excitedly, Remus heard Neville whisper harshly to Anthony, "Serves you right for calling him evil." Remus desperately hoped that his Slytherin Hufflepuff class would go over much better than this one had. He was also undeniably curious what the boggart of the source of 2 of his classmates' fears would be. Remus smiled at the new set of students scattered among the staff room that afternoon. He tried not to watch Harry, but his eyes kept drifting to him in the back where he was whispering with Draco Malfoy, Blaise Zabini, and Susan Bones. Theodore Nott and Ronald Weasley were standing close by, interjecting the discussion occasionally with their own input. Remus went through the introduction of the boggart again, allowed the students to practice the incantation, and asked for a volunteer to go first. Harry snorted lightly and backed up until his back was completely flat against the wall. "What was that, Harry? You volunteer," Remus said, knowing full well that it was more of a snort of disdain than an eager offer to go first. "Not a chance," Harry said flatly. "I'm not doing this." Susan glanced up at Remus before quickly leaning over to whisper in Harry's ear. "What's going on?" she breathed. "Show everyone my worst fear." "No, you know they'd just use it against me," Harry whispered back. Remus cleared his throat and smiled gently at Harry. "Everyone will go today. You cannot learn the spell without testing it." "One galleon Harry can do it in his sleep," Blaise whispered to Ronald, who rolled his eyes and declined the bet. "I'm not doing it," Harry said, his jaw set stubbornly, much like Lily's always had. "Harry, I don't want to punish you, but if you refuse to participate in class, then you leave me no choice," Remus warned him. Surely this defiant boy wasn't the sweet, brilliant, polite pupil that his co-workers raved over to him. Remus had chalked up Harry's previous attitude with him to unneeded embarrassment at Remus witnessing him in a vulnerable moment. Harry didn't seem like the type of kid who wanted pity or to be coddled. Now he wondered if he alone had somehow earned Harry's disdain before they had even officially met. Clearly changing his nappies as an infant didn't endear Remus to Harry. "Punish me then," Harry sneered at him, abruptly going from looking like a determined Lily to resembling a derisive Severus. "Okay," Remus said lightly, "detention tonight." Harry scoffed and leaned against the wall, reminding Remus painfully of the arrogant way James often stood. "All right, who volunteers to go first then?" Remus clapped his hands and looked around at the wary students. "I'll go," Hannah Abbott, a soft-spoken Hufflepuff girl, offered. "Excellent, thank you, Hannah," Remus praised her. "Now what would you say is your worst fear?" "The bloody Baron," Hannah said with a little shudder. Some of the students, mostly the Slytherin, chuckled at that. Remus saw Harry and Susan roll their eyes almost simultaneously. "The Baron freaks me out too," Remus told Hannah with a reassuring smile. "Can you close your eyes now and think of a way that the Baron wouldn't be so frightening, a way that he would be funny instead?" Hannah closed her eyes for a few moments before opening them with a giggle. "Got it," she said, now grinning. "Okay, keep that picture clear in your mind when the wardrobe opens. The Baron will come out, and you'll need to clearly imagine that comical sight as you say the spell, all right?" Hannah nodded eagerly and stepped up in front of the wardrobe. 3, 2, 1. Remus unlocked the wardrobe and watched as the Boggart Blood Baron floated out silently towards Hannah. "Ridiculous," Hannah yelled, laughing when the chains fell off the Baron to reveal polka-dotted pajamas and fuzzy bunny slippers. "Wonderful, Draco now." Draco stepped forward, and the pajama-clad Baron turned into a swirling tornado of what Remus was fairly sure was dozens of inferi. "Ridiculous," Draco cried, retreating quickly once the tornado stopped and became filled with adorable meowing kittens now instead. "A tornado of kittens would not be as useful as inferi," Harry whispered to Draco as Remus called up Gregory Goyle. "Your mad ideas are terrifying," Draco whispered back. With another sharp crack, the meowing tornado of kittens turned into a cackling goblin holding an axe. "PFT, what a tosser," Harry whispered. Remus thought it was rather rich of Harry to critique his classmates' fears when he was unwilling to face his own. After Gregory turned the cackling goblin into a winged cupid, Remus called up Ernie Macmillan. "Sweet Merlin, not another one." The cupid turned to Ernie and immediately changed into an angry Harry, his green eyes flashing darkly as he pointed his wand at Ernie. Remus glanced back at Harry to gauge his reaction and saw that Harry and his friends were all looking smugly at Ernie's boggart. "Ah, ridiculous." Harry's black hair became hot pink and ridiculously curly. Not a soul laughed, as the earlier class had at the image of Harry in a dress. Remus thought it had something to do with the way Harry was staring calmly at Ernie, with his wand now out and twirling in his hand. "Tracy." Tracy Davis stepped forward slowly and watched as the boggart Harry turned into a fanged vampire. "Ridiculous." The vampire took his fangs out with a smile, revealing them to be a common plastic muggle toy. "Wonderful job, Millicent." Crack. The vampire was briefly an impossibly tall mountain, before Millicent shouted out the incantation and shrunk the mountain to a pocket-sized miniature. "Very good, next Blaze." Crack. The boggart cracked into an image of a beautiful woman laying peacefully in a coffin that Blaze Zabini stared at silently for a moment before crack. The woman stood up and began dancing. Remus felt a pang of sympathy for Blaze Zabini. Even though his boggart took on the shape of the full moon, he too had worried about life without his mother. "Excellent, Blaze, Justin now." Justin Finchfletchy stepped forward and crack. A giant, black-scaled snake reared its head, fangs aimed right at Justin. "Ridiculous." The fangs fell off and the snake let out a soft squeak. "Why didn't you try that?" Ronald whispered to Harry in the back of the room. "Took one fang off, did I?" Harry whispered back with a cocky grin. "Good work, Justin, Theodore now." The Slytherin boy that was a part of Harry's group of friends stepped forward, his face pale and his hands slightly shaking. The snake quivered for a moment and then crack. Man roughly Remus' size, though much older, with brown hair and eyes that matched Theodore, held his wand high. "What have I told you? The man that Remus would wager is Theodore's father," thundered, You were raised better than that." Theodore held his own wand up slowly, his wide eyes trained on the boggart's raised wand. Ridiculous," he whispered. The boggart just laughed and Remus stepped forward lightly, allowing the man to change into his full moon before deflating it. When Remus had learned this lesson, in his own 3rd year, the Gryffindors had shared it with the Ravenclaws, a schedule that remained the same today. He had never stopped to wonder what the Slytherin students feared, never considered that the legacy Slytherins who were raised in traditional pure-blooded families may have much more realistic and immediate fears than goblins and severed hands. "It's okay, Theodore, good job," he said quietly to the shaken boy. "Ronald now," he said louder. "It's weakened, we're almost there." Remus watched sadly as Theodore quickly returned to his friends, and Susan Bones quickly grabbed his hand. "You're okay," she murmured softly. Remus nearly missed seeing the boggart take on Harry's form, once again, while he watched Theodore out of the corner of his eye. "For the love of Merlin, what is that, 4 Harry Boggarts now?" "You're out of the gang," Boggart Harry sneered, pointing a large blood-covered sword at Ronald. Remus was incredibly confused, as it had seemed to him that Harry and Ronald were close friends. They sat together on the train, and had played cards together and laughed together. Why would someone's deepest fear be one of their closest friends? Remus recognized the irony of that thought almost immediately, but Sirius would hardly have been one of his fears when they were classmates and friends. He truly needed to discuss these boggarts with Harry's guardian tonight. He watched as Ronald shot a panicked look over his shoulder at Harry, who shook his head slightly at him, a calm expression on his face. Susan Bones was giggling quietly at his side, though Draco Malfoy appeared to be as pale at Ronald's boggart as he had his own. "Ridiculous!" Ronald yelled. The sword in Boggart Harry's hands sagged limply, causing the Boggart Harry to look comically surprised. "Good pansy now." "2 galleons, it's Harry," Ronald whispered to Theo as he returned to his friends. Theo let out a small chuckle and shook his hand. And sure enough, the boggart barely had to change shapes, merely losing the limp sword for a red pocket knife. "Who's not special now?" Boggart Harry hissed with a mean smile. "Ridiculous." Remus shook his head as he heard the clink of coins that indicated Ronald had just pocketed his winnings from Theo. "Vincent," he called, feeling exhaustion beginning to creep into his bones. He hoped that Severus would give him a pain-relieving potion with minimal resistance when he went to speak with him after Harry's detention tonight. He mentally crossed his fingers that this would not be a 6th Harry Potter when crack. Wonderful! A much-exaggerated mythical version of a werewolf appeared. Remus held himself still, trying to not react since he knew that at least a quarter of the class was aware of his affliction. "Ooh," Harry howled suddenly from the back of the room. Remus looked sharply at him, planning on scolding him for, once again, mocking his classmates' fear. Instead he found himself chuckling lightly as Harry winked cheekily at him, the first friendly gesture he's gotten from James' son. Defender of werewolf rights and feared by his classmates, who is this kid? After Vincent turned the werewolf into an adorable puppy, Remus eyed the room for anyone who had yet to face the boggart. "Daphne, then we'll have Susan finish it off," he called. Daphne Greengrass stepped forward and gaped, horrified, when the puppy turned into a young blonde-haired girl, lying on a bed, pale-faced and silent. Remus recognized the girl as Astoria Greengrass, one of his quiet Slytherin first-year students. Everyone watched silently as Daphne just stared at the boggart. Her eyes filled with tears, and her chin quivered slightly. "Astoria," Daphne breathed before abruptly turning and retreating to the very back of the classroom. "That's all right," Remus said gently. "Last one now, Susan." Susan squeezed Theodore's hand before stepping up confidently. The corpse of the young girl turned into the corpse of Harry. At least this is Harry with a sword, or a pocket knife, or his wand, or hissing, Remus thought. Though this boggart was nearly as disturbing, apparently Harry being bloodily slashed to death was Susan's deepest fear. Remus would wager, based on the look of surprise, fear and agony on Susan's face, that this wasn't what she expected. Susan stared at the corpse, and just as Remus was about to step up and put an end to the whole lesson crack, Corpse Harry was now the corpse of Amelia Bones. Remus gently moved Susan to the side as he stepped in front of the body. After once again deflating his moon, he shoved the boggart back into the wardrobe and took in the sight of his class. Many of the students were teary-eyed. Tracy was consoling a full-on crying Daphne as Harry was squeezing Susan's hand and glaring at Remus accusingly. As if Harry himself isn't the most commonly feared thing in this room. "Good work, everyone," Remus said weakly. 10 points to everyone who faced their fear. For Monday, he faltered as he saw the defeated looks on the majority of the students' faces. "Never mind," he sighed, "just have a good weekend." He called out a reminder of the night's detention to Harry, who stormed out of the classroom with his arm now wrapped consolingly around Susan's shoulders. "Brill," Harry growled back at him. Apparently Susan's boggart had taken away any goodwill Harry had previously felt towards him. Remus put his head in his hands as he considered the disaster this lesson had caused. He swore that he would never teach boggarts again, certainly not to the Slytherin. At any rate, Severus could do it next year. At 6 that evening, Harry knocked on Remus' office door. Remus was disheartened to see that Harry looked tense. All of his muscles were coiled tightly, and Lily's green eyes flickered around the room warily before he stepped inside. He was clearly terrified of being alone with Remus. Despite Harry's own defense of werewolves on the train, it must bother him more to actually be alone with Remus. "We won't be having detention here," Remus said lightly, getting to his feet and grabbing his wand. Remus went to walk past Harry to leave the office, and Harry flinched away from him. "Follow me," Remus said, maintaining his polite tone despite his own disappointment. "Of course he's terrified of you, you're a monster." Harry followed behind Remus, albeit several feet away, as he led him to the staff room. "What are we doing?" Harry asked once he recognized the doorway. "You face your boggart, your detention is over," Remus said, holding the door open for him. "Between you and I, this spell will be on your final exam, and it's important that you learn it now." "No," Harry said, stepping away from the office door. "I'm not doing it." "Then we'll be here all night tonight, and every other night until you do," Remus said with a pleasant smile. Harry glared at him defiantly, no doubt mentally rearranging his schedule to fit this in. "Harry, I will not tell anyone what your boggart is," Remus said softly. "I understand if you want to keep it private." Harry continued to stare silently at Remus. He could practically see Harry's thoughts whirling behind his eyes when Harry blinked, and seemed to adopt an uninterested mask. Severus is clearly teaching him occlumency, Remus thought as he witnessed the masterful shutdown of visible emotions. "Fine." Remus gave him what he hoped was a reassuring smile as he gestured towards the open door. "After you, then." Harry slowly inched around him, keeping his eyes trained on Remus' hands as if worried he would suddenly claw him. "Damn you, Severus." Remus would never be able to build any semblance of a relationship with James' son if being alone with the big bad werewolf had Harry this much on edge. "Do you know what your fear is?" Remus asked him. Harry shrugged, quirking his lips up slightly in a look that was entirely his own. "Probably seeing my boggart in front of you," he drawled. Remus sighed and fought down the headache that had been building ever since he saw Seamus Finnegan's boggart. "You know, you featured in quite a few fears today," he said conversationally, watching Harry closely. "Any idea why that might be?" "Suppose it means I'm scary, sir," Harry said in the same drawling tone he used before. "Can we do this so I can go, please?" "All right then, wand ready." Harry shook his head and flicked his right hand, releasing a burst of purple lights into the air beside him. "No thanks," he smirked. "I don't really use one, do I?" Remus resisted the urge to laugh. "More arrogant than you ever were, buddy," he thought, picturing James' smug look if he could see his son now. "As you please," Remus said. 3, 2, 1, go. Remus unlocked the wardrobe and stepped back as Harry stepped forward. Remus felt his hackles rise as Severus Snape stepped out of the wardrobe and sneered at Harry. "If he's been hurting Harry, I swear to Merlin." "You're not special," Boggart Snape sneered at Harry. "You're disgusting, a monster, a nobody. You're worth less than the trash you slept on." Remus watched as Harry lost his previous smirk and turned a horrible shade of white with his mouth open in a perfect O of surprise. "Focus, Harry," Remus encouraged him quietly. "Come on now, ridiculous." Harry didn't even tear his eyes off of the boggart, who was now right in his face. "Nobody cares about you, you're worthless, you don't matter, you're a monster, a freak." Harry stumbled backwards from the boggart and Remus felt guilt washing over him as Harry fell to the floor. Harry had his eyes clenched tightly shut, clearly trying to avoid looking at the boggart Snape, who was now calling him a variety of vulgar names. Remus darted forward just as boggart Snape was calling Harry a whore, of all the random insults to use. He finished off his own boggart, shoving it back into the wardrobe, and frowned sadly down at the frozen Harry. "Harry," he called gently, "are you all right?" Harry continued to sit silently, his eyes closed, and Remus was startled to see his lower lip began trembling slightly. "Hey, it's okay." Remus knelt down and placed a comforting hand on Harry's shoulder. "It's just—" "Don't fucking touch me," Harry yelped, cringing quickly away from Remus. "I don't know what your game is getting me alone and peopling that." He pointed at the wardrobe, "but I'm not fucking falling for it. Don't touch me ever again," he hissed before scrambling quickly to his feet and frantically running out of the room. Remus sat on the floor and stared sadly in his own lap for a few minutes. He made his way to his own feet as he felt anger replacing his guilt and remorse. Severus was now the boggart of 2 students, and he was going to answer some damn questions. Chapter 8: Depressed Wards and Dead Wolves. "Severus, you have some explaining to do." Severus looked up as Remus Lupin stormed into his office, his amber eyes glowing angrily. Severus flicked his wand into his hand beneath his desk. Lupin may masquerade as a gentle-hearted school teacher with his cardigans and kind smiles, but Severus wasn't fooled. Lupin's disease gave him more than just enhanced senses. The man could throw Severus through the wall if the thought occurred to him. And if Severus would let him get that far to begin with. "Do I?" he said silkily, "and pray tell what exactly you believe I must explain to you." "I taught the 3rd years about boggarts today," Lupin said, arrogantly sitting in the seat across Severus' desk, quite uninvited. "I am aware," Severus said. "I was present when you brought your class to the staff room." "What you missed was your appearance as one of the students' boggarts," Lupin said harshly, clearly intending to hurt Severus with the news. "Just one?" Severus asked, raising an interested brow. "Last year I managed to be 3 boggarts." Damn, Potter was making him soft. "2 actually," Lupin huffed, irritated by Severus' unaffected tone. "But Harry has you beat. He was 6 of his year mates' worst fear." That was much less amusing." "Fuck," Severus breathed, shock clouding his judgment in speaking more freely around Lupin. Was he really? One boggart Harry smirking at Seamus, one of Harry hissing at Anthony, one of Harry threatening Ron with a bloody sword, Harry with a pocket knife in Pansy's face, Harry pointing his wand at Ernie, and my personal favourite, Harry's blood-covered corpse that Susan created. Severus listened to Lupin list off the various classmates that Potter had viciously, and justifiably, fought with the past 2 years. Finnegan had been a part of a group of boys who had attacked Potter, 4-1, and Severus sent him to the hospital wing after Potter cut his shoulder open with his pocket knife. Macmillan had been one of the more outspoken students last year, convinced that Potter was petrifying Muggle-borns. Potter had probably attacked him for it at some point, and just escaped punishment in the shock of the basilisk attacks. Parkinson had tormented Potter quite frequently their first couple of years. Severus himself had broken up a rather magnificent fight between the 2 of them in their first year, when Potter snapped her wand in half. Severus couldn't recall a specific incident involving Goldstein, but Harry had taken up cursing in Parseltongue quite fluently after returning to Hogwarts last year. Even if Severus privately found it incredibly amusing, he supposed the cold hissing coming from Potter in moments of anger could be unsettling to the students with no deeper fears in their lives. Weasley had been a witness to Potter ending Gilderoy's life with his sword at the end of the last school year. Severus was only mildly surprised that Draco hadn't had the same boggart. Weasley must have more frightened by the event than Draco had been. Draco was the one who Gilderoy was planning to kill though, so Draco apparently, and rightfully, hadn't lost a lot of sleep over it. As unsurprising as these fears were, given what Severus knew about their likely origins, Bones, fear cut very close to home for Severus. Potter's bloody corpse would feature in many of Severus' worst imaginings until Sirius Black was captured. It was not a shock to Severus that the fiercely loyal and incredibly attached Miss Bones was thinking along the same lines. "Potter is uniquely misunderstood by many of his classmates," Severus said, weighing his words very carefully. "While rational adults may find Potter's behavior to be understandable, it is reasonable that young children may occasionally fear it." "What I don't find understandable," Lupin said slowly, baring his teeth in an impressively effective show of aggression, "is why Harry's boggart was you." "Me? I trust you." Potter trusted him, why would he fear him? Explain, Severus said tersely. Harry refused to do the lesson today, Lupin said, tilting forward to lean on Severus' desk, his voice heated. He told Susan that he thought his classmates would use his worst fear against him, so I gave him detention for refusing to participate in class. Severus nearly smiled as he realized that Lupin was doing himself no favors in cozying up to Potter. When he came for detention, terrified thanks to you, Lupin said with a growl, I told him he had to face the boggart or he'd have detention every night until he did. At that, Severus did smile outright. He would wager that Lupin's threat rolled right off Potter's back, and sure enough. Harry didn't seem to care at all, so I told him that I wouldn't tell anyone what his boggart was, and he finally agreed to face it. Severus unconsciously leaned forward, morbidly curious to discover how he became Potter's worst fear. And, he said when Lupin hesitated. And you stepped out of the wardrobe making fun of him, Lupin said, abruptly looking furious again. Severus was now quite perplexed. Making fun of him, Potter is afraid of me taunting him. How queer. Severus was sure that he had at least a close enough relationship with Potter that he wouldn't fear something as juvenile as being bullied by him. Potter was a survivor of much worse traumas. What had Severus done to trigger this fear? Is this a result of calling the brat insane over the summer? Perhaps his heat-of-the-moment remark had cut close to Potter. Severus was fairly confident he'd already apologized for that. They were odd taunts, Lupin allowed hesitantly, but what I'd like to know is why Harry's worst fear is you calling him a freak and a monster. Oh. Severus leaned back in his chair, confident he had solved the mystery of Potter's boggart. Specifically, if your addled brain can recall, what did the boggart say to Potter? Lupin glared at Severus for a moment before obliging. You're not special, you're disgusting, a monster, a nobody, you're worth less than the trash you slept on. Nobody cares about you, you're worthless, you don't matter, you're a monster, a freak, Lupin recited dully. I believe at one point you also referred to him as a worthless whoring orphan, or perhaps a worthless whore of an orphan. It was difficult to distinguish given the number of vulgarities you were saying. For fuck's sake, Harry, couldn't you be scared of the dark or something equally ridiculous? His boggart was quite specifically revealing. Interesting, was all Severus replied. Lupin slammed his hand down on Severus' desk, overturning his inkwell. It is not interesting. Why is James' son terrified of you calling him a freak, Severus? He growled, showing his wolf side as obviously as if he were fully transformed. Calm yourself, Severus said, holding his wand steady and aimed at Lupin beneath the desk. He was not a child anymore, and Lupin was no longer the most terrifying beast he'd encountered. If the man made one wrong step, Severus would have no difficulties in putting him down for good. Lupin took a shuddering breath before leaning back and looking evenly at Severus, his eyes cooling to a more relaxed shade of amber. Well, he said, after they had stared each other down for many tense moments. Severus cleared his throat lightly. Firstly, I believe his name is Harry, not James' son, he sneered. Surely with your enhanced eyesight you can see that Potter is his own person. Lupin scoffed. You call him Potter, he muttered, but Severus could see his face darkening into an ashamed blush. The point had been made. Secondly, he continued, I believe what you are actually asking me, Lupin, is do I make a habit of tormenting my ward with verbal abuse? And though it is absolutely none of your business, I will answer anyway to put the matter at rest. I do not. I have never once said those words to Harry, and I never will. Satisfied? No, Lupin cried. Why would Harry even be thinking those things in the first place? If you didn't say it, and the look he gave Severus heavily relayed his belief in that theory, then who did? Perhaps you should ask Potter, Severus suggested calmly, as this is his incredibly personal and private experience you are sharing with me, despite your assurances to keep it private. Lupin's scarred face turned a satisfying shade of red before scowling. I tried talking to him, but he's terrified of me. Is he? Severus asked, his interest piqued. Potter had seemed to vehemently support werewolves and other creatures' rights. He'd been snarling and rude on the train, much to Severus' never-ending amusement, but Severus had chalked it up to Potter resenting someone he did not trust viewing him in a moment of what he would consider to be weakness. Perhaps he wasn't as comfortable alone with the wolf as Severus assumed he would be. I tried to talk to him after I had to finish the boggart. He was scared out of his mind and on the verge of another nervous breakdown, I thought, but then he started yelling at me not to touch him. Don't touch me. I don't know what your game is, getting me alone and pulling that, but I'm not falling for it. Don't touch me ever again. Lupin recited, glaring at Severus as if this were his fault. He also made liberal use of a few curse words, while he desperately tried to get as far away from me as he could. Potter once again showcasing his trust in adult males alone with him. Severus hadn't meant to sigh out loud, but how often could one be reminded of their ward's traumatic experiences without feeling themselves beginning to break each time? "Potter, you menace," he said softly, rubbing his eyes. He looked at Lupin and saw that the man's glare had receded slightly, though he still appeared to be furious with the wrong target. Severus weighed the pros and cons of releasing a very minimal amount of Potter's past to Lupin. On the one hand, Potter would likely burn Severus' office to the ground if he discovered what he would consider to be a horrible betrayal. On the other hand, despite Severus' own deep dislike and distrust of Lupin, he doubted whether the man would intentionally trigger Potter in the future if he was aware of some of his fears. Lupin was desperate to bond with James' son, and he couldn't do that if he cornered Potter and set him off during every interaction. Severus personally could not care less about Lupin's desperation to get to know Potter. In the deepest and most insecure part of his heart, the part that thought about history repeating itself, he worried that Potter would be won over by Lupin's friendly and easygoing nature and find him preferable to Severus. Ultimately, though, Severus had to think of what was best for his ward, and he believed that it would be better for Potter's mental health in the long run if he was not continuously terrified by one of his professors. It would also lessen the odds of Lupin triggering a possible manic-depressive episode, which truly decided it in the end for Severus. He was still hoping that the mind healer had been wrong, but on the chance that he was not wrong, Severus had no wish for Potter to begin cycling during the school year. Severus considered Lupin very carefully. "If you repeat this to another soul, you may find that my hand has slipped and overdosed your monthly potion with wolfsbane," he said coolly. "Will it be next month's dose? Perhaps. It could be the one after that or the next one. You will have no idea until you take your potion one evening and find yourself struggling to breath. You will eventually suffocate from the lack of activity in your lungs and die, pathetically alone in your office. Is that clear?" Lupin looked rather startled by Severus' threat promise. "Good. Is this how you speak to Harry as well?" Lupin muttered. "And Amelia thought you'd be a good guardian. No wonder he goes around terrifying his classmates." "Your word, Lupin," Severus said, smirking at the thought of Lupin raising a complaint about him to Amelia. She'd just as likely purchase the wolfsbane herself if she believed Lupin was a threat to Potter's mental health. Clearly the friends of Lily Evans were more dedicated than those of James Potter. "Fine, yes, not a word," Lupin huffed, crossing his arms, looking much like the juvenile he acts like. "Potter thinks of you as a predator," Severus said bluntly. "And whose fault is that?" Lupin immediately demanded. "You told him what I am." Severus was momentarily confused and incredibly disgusted until he realized the idiot's confusion. "Not that kind of predator, you unforgivable imbecile," he rolled his eyes. "You being a werewolf is probably the only thing about you that Potter finds interesting and non-threatening." "What kind of predator then?" Lupin asked, scrunching his brows down in confusion. "If you really think he doesn't care about my problem." Severus nearly snorted at Lupin's polite way of describing his disease. He sighed again and pinched the bridge of his nose, as he unfortunately had to spell it out. "You read the Daily Prophet last year," he said. "Yes," Lupin responded slowly. "So you read about Potter being evicted by his relatives, and how he was effectively homeless for quite some time." "I didn't know if it was true or not, Rita, you know," Lupin trailed off hesitantly. "It was unfortunately true," Severus said, sitting up and giving Lupin as blank of a face as he was able to given the current topic of conversation. "I now invite you to use your damned imagination as to the kind of disgusting vermin that a small, vulnerable, and desperate child sleeping in alleyways would have been exposed to." Severus took no pleasure out of the blood draining from Lupin's face as he pieced together his meaning. "Merlin," Lupin sighed, his eyes appearing to become misty. I would never. Getting Potter alone and then putting your hands on him is certainly no way to reconnect with your dead best friend's son," Severus said harshly. He didn't care if it hurt Lupin. How dare the man appear so emotional over Potter's past when he was one of the many who could have stepped forward and fought for Potter after Lily's death, and if not fought for placement of him, at least visited the child and checked on his welfare, mailed him a birthday card even. What good are his tears of regret now? The damage has been done. La folie circulaire. According to the massive amount of research Severus had done the last 2 months, Potter could have had years more before he developed the illness, if it developed at all, had his childhood not been so traumatic. And Remus Lupin, great friend of James Potter, could have done more towards that goal. Done anything at all. Get out, Severus said, cutting off whatever emotional drivel Lupin was protesting with. You came here to attack me over the boggart of my ward, when what you know about Potter couldn't fill a fourth of a sheet of parchment. Get out. Severus, Out, Severus snapped. Get out of my sight now, Lupin. Lupin gave him a sorrowful look as he left Severus' office, his not-so-hypothetical tail tucked between his legs. Severus slumped in his chair, abruptly exhausted. While he tried to not imagine Potter on the verge of a nervous breakdown, he also could not help but feel moderately vindicated by Potter's boggart. Potter, the seemingly fearless and scrappy survivor of a child, feared Severus spewing Potter's own worst thoughts back at him. It meant that Potter did trust Severus, that Severus must mean something to him if he fears being rejected and invalidated by him. It was heartening to know, though he would never admit it to anyone, he worried at times that Potter was incapable of true emotional connection. Yet he feared Severus rejecting him. He must feel emotionally connected to Severus to have such a specific fear. So tomorrow he would see Potter, and he would continue to reassure him that the real Severus would never think, let alone even say, those things about him. Potter fears that nobody cares about him, believes himself to be a worthless nobody. Severus will just show him otherwise, and perhaps one day the ridiculous child will believe it. Lupin, Severus murmured softly to the wolf seated on his right-hand side as he carefully scanned the great hall the next morning. What happened after Potter's detention last night? I came straight to your office, Lupin said back, thankfully just as quietly as Severus had spoken. Before that, but after Potter yelled at you. You said he appeared on the verge of a breakdown. Surely you didn't allow him to run off alone if he was truly that visibly upset. Well, it wasn't like he wanted me following him, Lupin muttered sulkily. I thought it would be better if I just let him be and went to talk with you. Severus gave Lupin a sharp look. Surely Severus was not the only professor in this entire godforsaken castle with the slightest knowledge of trauma, mental illness, or psychology at all. Granted, Severus was now making what seemed to be nearly biannual visits with a muggle mind healer seeking advice for handling Potter, but Lupin transformed into a disgusting beast once a month. Who would know more about emotional and mental triggers than the man who literally loses his rational mind every full moon? You checked first that Potter returned to his common room safely, Severus hissed. No, Lupin mumbled shamefacedly. Did you call for one of his friends to go check on him? Severus demanded. I didn't think of it, Lupin said. Why does it matter now? Severus gazed around the room quickly again, before carefully counting the grouping at the end of the Slytherin table. Lovegood, Draco, Granger, Theodore, Blaze, Ronald, Longbottom, Bones. And right beside Bones, Potter's customary corner seat against the wall, empty. Because he didn't show up for breakfast, despite his entire gang of miscreants attending. So he overslept, Lupin whispered, now looking around the hall to check himself. Is that the end of the world? Try to avoid things that could possibly trigger an episode. Once an episode begins, you'll need to keep a close eye on Harry. Potter had been in what the research termed a stable mind place since mid-July. Severus had sincerely hoped they would have longer than 2 months before something set the child off. He truly had no idea why he thought anything regarding Potter would follow some sort of optimistic path. Severus thought of Potter's destabilizing depressive episode over the summer. He thought of Potter's depression last school year. He recalled Potter's whispered confession, I just don't see a point to it all sometimes. He thought of Potter once rambling how his barriers had fallen when he'd been expelled and the pain had been too much. I couldn't take it and then I did something stupid. And Severus felt an unfortunately all too familiar panic creep in. Is it the end of the world? Perhaps not Lupin's, but Severus, certainly if he did not find Potter. If I do not find Potter in one piece, and of sound mind, I will rip you from limb to limb, wolf, Severus spat before sweeping away from the table. Once again, he had to go find his ward, and hope that Lupin and the boggart had not triggered Potter's most self-destructive tendencies. Where is Potter? Severus asked the students at the end of the Slytherin table. He's sick, sir, Ronald said quickly. Sick, Severus repeated. Was he vomiting? Did he have a fever? Sweats? I don't know. Ronald glanced at Theodore, who shrugged. He just said he's sick and to leave him alone. I'm sick. I don't feel good. Severus was going to kill Remus Lupin. Delightful, Severus said. Perhaps next time your roommate is ill, you will immediately inform your head of house, who also has a stock of medicinal potions at his disposal. Yes, sir, the 4 Slytherin boys mumbled, looking appropriately abashed. Severus made to exit the hall, and was only mildly surprised to see Susan Bones trailing behind him. I believe you have class starting soon, Miss Bones, he said, as he swiftly made his way to the dungeons. You believe wrong, it's Saturday. Severus gave her an unappreciative look. Even if the girl was correct, he was still her professor. Potter will likely be contagious, he told her. He hadn't truly thought such a weak warning would deter her, and it hadn't. Bones just hummed, easily keeping up with his quick stride. He will not appreciate seeing you if he is unwell, he said honestly. Do you believe Potter will be pleased for you to see him right now? Bones cursed lightly under her breath. Severus considerately pretended to not have heard it. He found the foul-mouthed Hufflepuff girl to be rather amusing, when the vitriol was not directly aimed at him. I'll just walk you then, okay, she said with a grimace of irritation. Severus nodded, and the duo continued toward the Slytherin common room in silence. As Severus approached the Slytherin entrance to give the password, Bones stopped and frowned at Severus. Are we pretending you do not know the password and haven't spent the majority of your free periods in my students' house, Miss Bones? He asked sardonically. I was just going to tell you that if you can't get Harry out of bed that you should get Luna, she said after a moment of hesitation. Severus turned and looked at her more carefully. Bones had a solemn look on her face that made Severus believe she also instinctively knew Potter was not sick. Not in the classic sense, anyway. He glanced down the empty corridor before casting a non-verbal muffliato. And what will Miss Lovegood do for Potter that you believe I cannot? He asked. This stays between us, she asked with a shrewd look. I will not lie to Potter, Severus said slowly. If he is being delayed to Potter by some juvenile attempt at testing his trustworthiness, Miss Bones would sincerely regret it. Neither would I, she scoffed. I meant anyone except for Harry, of course. Then what you say will remain between us as long as we understand each other. Bones eyed him speculatively, likely looking for any hidden implications in his words or expression. After finding none, she released a huff of air. Luna and Harry, they're like, they understand each other, Bones said. Harry loves her, I just know she'll get him up if you can't. Severus was startled by the flippancy in Bones' voice, and by her confident remark that Potter loved Miss Lovegood. She's 12, Severus said flatly. Miss Bones laughed and smiled up at Severus. Not like that kind of love, she giggled. Not yet anyway, maybe one day, who knows, but Harry loves her, can't you tell? Severus couldn't tell. He knew Potter was fond of Miss Lovegood, worried about her on occasion, and allowed her the same liberties with physical contact as he did Bones, but he could not tell that Potter was capable of a deeply complex and unselfish emotion such as love. He hoped he was, but he hadn't seen it for himself yet. I thought you were Potter's closest friend, Severus said evasively, now too intrigued about Potter's gang's dynamics to pass up a freely given opportunity to learn more. Oh, I am, Bones said confidently. I'm his best friend. Harry trusts me the most, but he loves Luna the most. I think she reminds him of himself. Oh, Severus tried to taper back the burning curiosity lacing his tone. How does the airy, charming, and dreamy Miss Lovegood remind Potter of himself? Bones gave Severus what he considered to be an incredibly patronizing look. Because they're both acting all the time, she said. Luna dances through life not making attachments so nobody can hurt her. Luna avoids attachment with her own thoughts and dreams. Harry does the same thing, except he just hits first before anyone has the chance to hit him. He thinks it hurts less that way, but he found Luna and he saved her, and now he loves her. And what is Potter saving her from? He asked. Despite himself, he was curious to hear more of Bones' insights into Potter's mind. Though he'd never tell the fierce little Hufflepuff, it was rather impressive the way she recognized things that most adults wouldn't. Certainly most adults within this castle anyway. Being alone, Bones said simply. Harry saw that she was alone, like he used to be, and he's going to make sure she never is again. Severus thought it said a lot about Bones' unshakable belief in Potter that she said, he going to make sure, as opposed to he's going to try. You would make an excellent mind healer after Hogwarts if it interested you. It would be difficult, convincing Wixon that it is more than a muggle occupation, but I believe if anyone could do it, it would be you. Severus admitted to her with an approving look. It was as much of a compliment as he would give to the girl who called him a wide variety of foul names during Potter's expulsion last year. Bones giggled again, regressing back to her more youthful tone of voice. "Can't, I'm going to be Vice Minister of Magic." She looked up at him with a slightly gap-toothed grin. "I was not aware there was a position titled that in our ranks," said Severus. "There isn't, not yet anyway. Harry'll make it for me when he's the minister, though." Severus nearly snorted at her confidence in Potter's apparently lofty future ambitions. He glanced at the Slytherin door behind him and mentally sighed. "As interesting as this all has been, I do have an ill student I must see to. Can you advise your merry band of misfits to find another place to congregate today?" Bones looked thoughtful. "Do you think him being in bed has anything to do with his detention last night?" Severus felt his lip curl in irritation at the reminder of Lupin's outrageous incompetence and his thick-skulled determination to force Potter to face his boggart. "That's what I thought," Bones said with a polite smile. "I think we'll go hang out in the defense corridor today. Let me know if you need Luna." Bones had excellent intuition. Severus smirked as Bones skipped down the corridor, and he entered the Slytherin common room and made for the stairs. He hopes Lupin is adequately terrorized by Potter's friends. It would be terribly karmic if Potter and his gang made Lupin's time in the castle as miserable as James, Potter and his friends made Severus. Severus took a deep breath and counted to 10 twice before entering the dorm. "Harry's," he called. "Wake up." "I'm awake." Severus walked up to Potter's bed and frowned at the pathetic sight before him. Potter was curled up on his side, his knees defensively drawn to his chest. He had his glasses on and was staring out the window into the depths of the lake. His expression was blank, but Severus saw the red rims of his eyes and the dark shadows beneath them. "Mr. Weasley informed me you are ill," he said. "Yep," Potter said dully. Severus conjured a chair and sat beside Potter's head. "Shall I summon the uninspired drivel that my students call homework and grade them here today, or would you prefer we go poison Lupin together?" Potter turned his head slightly and blinked at him, as if just now noticing his presence. "What?" "I asked if you would like for me to grade your classmates' essays and make scathing remarks aloud for your amusement, or if brewing a poison for Lupin would be preferable," Severus repeated evenly. Potter would probably choose poison if he were in a mental place to choose a fun activity. It was one of the endless things about the child that amused and exasperated Severus in equal measures. "Why are you here?" Potter asked quietly, ignoring Severus' poor attempt at humor. "I would be remiss in my duties in leaving you alone while you are ill, unless you would prefer the company of Madame Pomfrey in the hospital wing," he asked, raising his brow in inquiry. Potter shook his head shortly and went back to silently staring at the window. Severus calmly summoned his 4th students' most recent essays and began critiquing them aloud as he graded. "Mr. Yarito believes that diced bat spleen can prevent an antioxidant solution from reaching a freezing temperate," Severus said. "This, Harry, is why I only accept O students past 5th year. Dunderheads like Yarito would kill the entire castle if he made such a foolish mistake with the potions we brew." Severus was halfway through his stack of essays and was on quite a tirade about the ineptitude of the majority of the Gryffindor students when Potter finally spoke. "Do you have a boggart?" Potter said softly, his eyes never wavering from their fixed spot on the window. "I do," Severus said evenly, showing none of the surprise he felt at Potter bringing the topic up himself, and it was horribly traumatic to witness as a 13-year-old. "I have begged Albus to remove boggarts from the curriculum every year that I have been employed here." "I didn't think I'd have one," Potter said hesitantly. Severus would have laughed at the child's own confidence in his fearlessness had Potter not seemed so terribly devastated by the revelation. "I have never heard of a person who did not have one," Severus said. "I am unsure if such a phenomena is even a possibility, though I heavily doubt it." "Lupin told you mine," Potter said, not asked said. The child's intuition was razor-sharp, even in such a lethargic state. "He did," Severus confirmed. Potter flinched slightly beneath the quilt he was buried beneath. Severus hopes when Potter is back on his feet that Lupin will suffer for breaking the child's confidence. Severus may have felt even a sliver of guilt at the thought, But as he himself has had to lie about many worse things, to many more powerful people, on Potter's behalf he believes Lupin should have held his tongue. Severus would have ripped it from Lupin's mind regardless, but the coward could have put up a token protest at betraying Potter's fear. "Would you like to discuss it?" Severus offered. "I could inform you in as many as 7 different languages how I would never, and have never, said or thought any of those things about you." Potter flicked his eyes towards Severus, just once, before frowning slightly. "What's yours?" he asked instead. "When I was a 3rd year it was my father, which was both traumatic and humiliating to experience in front of my classmates," Severus said without hesitation. Potter was already aware of his childhood. He carried no secrets from the boy. "When I was 22 in my 1st year of teaching, it was the Dark Lord. I believe now that my boggart would be the same as Miss Bones." Potter shifted his head slightly in the mimic of a nod. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "What needless apology are you offering me?" Severus asked curiously. Potter closed his eyes tightly as he responded, "I'm gonna die soon." "What?" Severus felt as if his chest had suddenly become encased in ice. He could feel the goosebumps erupt down his arms at Potter's lifeless, dull tone. "Yep." "Explain your meaning immediately," said Severus, since "yep" was seemingly as much as Potter would voluntarily elucidate on his previous horrifying statement. "It's what Trelawney said," Potter said. "Oh, thank God. Trelawney is as woefully inept as you informed me that Hagrid is. The mere fact she said you will die soon fills me with the belief that you will live an impossibly long life." Severus tried to smile gently at Potter, but the child was still staring out the window listlessly. Potter laid in silence, seemingly talked out before he tonelessly said, "So the prophecy is fake. Son of a bitch." Or perhaps even the most fraudulent of seers can occasionally make an authentic prediction, if only by accident, Severus said cautiously. "Though I would place more confidence in Mr. Finnegan's abilities to graduate without ruining another cauldron in my classroom than I would Trelawney's prediction for the length of your life." Potter seemed to not have even heard Severus. He continued staring out the window, his green eyes as dull as Severus had ever seen them. "I just didn't think I'd have a boggart, 'cause I'm not scared to die, you know, so I didn't expect it," he said softly. Severus had once caught Potter in a similar mood to what he seemed to be in now. After Potter discovered Severus was the spy who shared the prophecy with the Dark Lord last year, Potter had been upset, despondent, but willing to speak. The child's mood now seemed to mimic that event more closely than it did the horrifyingly extended period of depression he had fallen in over the summer. He was sure there was a correlation somewhere in there. It merited consideration at a later time. A time where Potter had not just confessed his willingness to die. "Lily, give me the right words to convince him to live," Severus briefly prayed. "People think death is easy," he said as calmly as he was able. "And perhaps it is, but it is also the end, Harry. The end of laughing with your friends, the end of flying through the skis, the end of miniature treacle tarts, and the end of a possibility of a future so bright you cannot even imagine." Severus swallowed hard before gently continuing, "Death may not be frightening enough to be your boggart, but it is final. There is no second chance." "You were my boggart," Potter said softly. "I dunno why, but I hated it. I hate the Dementors that make the castle feel so cold. I hate the boggart." Potter's voice dropped to a whisper as he admitted, "I hate feeling like this, pathetic and worthless and weak." Severus uncrossed his legs as he bent down in an attempt to catch Potter's eye. "I believe I was likely your boggart because you trust me," Severus said, choosing his words with care. "Boggarts and Dementors both have a gift in making people believe they are weak when it is not true," he said emphatically. "I happen to be incredibly impressed by your strength. I am." Severus only hesitated for a moment before recalling his little fox patroness and barreling through his own discomfort. "Incredibly proud of you. I am proud of you, Harry." Potter frowned and pulled one hand beneath the blanket. Because of this, he flicked his wrist and released a spell strong enough that it burnt a decent-sized crater into the stone dormitory wall. Which actually was rather impressive. "No," said Severus. "While I believe your status as a magical prodigy is as admirable as it is fearsome, I meant for this." Severus tapped the side of his own head lightly with one finger. "It takes an incredible amount of mental strength to continue on when your body tries to convince you otherwise." "I don't want my body to convince me otherwise, but sometimes I do," Potter said. "But mostly I don't want to be weak, and I don't care what it takes to stop feeling that way." "That's an opening if I ever saw one." "I can help you, Harry," Severus said gently. "We can find a way to keep you from, for the love of God do not say feeling, reacting this way the next time you are faced with something upsetting." Potter blinked at him slowly for a long moment, and Severus held his breath. Like learning to cast a Patronus, Potter asked hesitantly. Severus frowned. He had not considered how heavily the aura of the Dementors would be affecting his ward from even inside the castle. But if Potter was requesting help to learn a spell to repel them, they must have a stronger pull on Potter than he had anticipated. I was thinking perhaps we could rehash our deal you denied over the summer and go see my Muggle friend, he said, though I am not unwilling to teach you how to cast a Patronus as well if you wish. I'm not seeing the mind healer, Potter said shortly. The first bit of true emotion Severus has seen so far, but I do want to learn the Patronus if you teach me. You will not change his mind in a day. It will take time. Of course, Severus said easily. It is considered to be a 6th-year level spell, but I am confident you will be able to learn it quickly. Really? Potter finally sat up. I tried to tell my magic to make a Patronus, but it didn't work and Susan said the spell meant I await a guardian, so I tried that too, but it still didn't do anything. There is a bit of emotional work that goes along with the Patronus, Severus said, thankful for any topic that brought Potter minimally back to life. If you would like we could start this evening, though it also rarely works on an empty stomach, so perhaps after dinner. Severus mentally crossed his fingers that Potter would not see through his blatant lie. Brill, sir, thank you. Potter started to smile slightly before hesitating. Actually, I can't today. I think I need to take care of something important. Oh, said Severus, have I been left out of the loop on any brash, Gryffindor-like schemes and plots? Potter hadn't mentioned Sirius Black in months, but Severus knows that doesn't mean he is not still thinking about him. Neville's a Gryffindor and he's the most careful person I know, Potter huffed, pushing the blankets off his legs. But I do need your advice. Maybe. Potter looked up at Severus through his messy fringe and looked suddenly nervous. You told me once that friends care about each other's feelings. Potter grimaced in a way that was terribly amusing and age-appropriate. How do you ask them about it, if you don't want them to be upset? Potter cares about the feelings of his friends. Severus could have wept with relief. He truly had no idea before now if Potter was even capable of empathy. Harry loves her. Is this about Miss Lovegood? Potter actually looked startled at that. No, why? Potter narrowed his eyes at him. What happened to Luna? As far as I am aware, Miss Lovegood is with your other friends, likely tormenting Lupin in one way or another, Severus assured him quickly. I apologize for causing you undue concern. I incorrectly assumed your question was about Miss Lovegood. Oh, Potter released his breath, clearly relieved that Lovegood was unharmed. No, it's not her. Will you tell me how to talk to them? Severus considered Potter's question carefully, even as he wondered which of his friends had earned the honor of being the first person Potter willingly discussed feelings with. Make them comfortable and then, depending on which friend it is, try and discuss it in a way they do not even notice it being discussed, Severus instructed him. Though I believe if it is Miss Bones, she would appreciate a blunt approach. Potter stood up and stretched while he chuckled slightly. It's not I gotta talk to Theo, but she's great, isn't she? He said fondly. You said they're tormenting Lupin. Do you know if they were all together? I am unsure, Severus said honestly. Miss Bones informed me this morning that she would be in the defense corridor, and I believe she was going to take your other friends along. Severus hesitated. Is Theodore all right? I was under the impression he has been disgustingly happy with Miss Granger and his newly increased workload. I'm no snitch, Potter murmured as he began digging through his trunk, presumably for a clean outfit as he was still in his pajamas. You do understand the difference between snitching and informing a trusted adult if you are justifiably concerned for another child, yes. The startled look Potter gave him was a very obvious no. Should I be concerned for Theodore? Severus tried to consider any recent changes that would trigger this unprecedented show of empathy in Potter. Do you believe he is depressed, or perhaps overworked? I think Lupin's an arse and I need Theo to help me kill him, Potter quipped, and that's all I can tell you, sir. Do not get caught, and you will find me in my office if you need assistance, Severus told him, only partially sure that Potter was attempting to make a joke in an attempt to sway Severus from prying further in to Theodore's current problem. The brat had killed both prior defense professors, though. Severus would not be too comfortable if he were Remus Lupin. "'Kay," Potter said, edging towards the washroom door. "I'm just gonna shower then. I really gotta find Theo. So it was nice of you to come up here, and maybe next weekend we can work on the Patronus, if you're not too busy." "Certainly," Severus assured him. I believe I am free from any prior obligations on Saturday mornings, if that is acceptable to you. Yep, Potter said. Brill, sir, thank you. Severus left the Slytherin dorm feeling inordinately pleased with himself. Potter had not been triggered into a manic-depressive cycle by Lupin's unthinking actions. Potter was displaying empathy, and Severus had not needed the assistance of Miss Lovegood to get Potter out of bed. Perhaps all Potter had needed was patience and a listening ear. Manic-depressive illness was a newly discovered diagnosis. Even the mind healer had said Potter was at least 2 years younger than the youngest diagnosed patient. Severus nearly smiled to himself at the thought. Perhaps just this once, Potter would catch a break and Severus' worry over cycles and mania were all for naught. He would just watch and wait. Watch, wait, and attempt to single-handedly change Potter's boggart by convincing the child that even in his worst imaginings, Severus would never say those things. Yes, that sounded like just the plan. And of course fit in his own torment of Remus Lupin, once he found adequate time. Chapter 9. Harry is having a lot of FELINGS, and it's mostly hate. As soon as Harry finished showering, he set off in search of his friends. He needed to find Theo. He'd been so distracted by his own exhausting and swirling thoughts that he hadn't realized what was right in front of him. And that wasn't okay. It was pathetic. Weak. Worthless. Theo was his, and Harry was stupid to not have noticed before. Like recognizes like. Harry took his invisibility cloak along with him in order to find his friends without risking running into Lupin. He wasn't scared of Lupin, and he wasn't hiding necessarily, he just didn't want the man to see him. It would be quicker to find his friends, grab Theo, and get out of there from underneath his cloak. He crept down the defense corridor, and was shocked by the pure amount of chaos that his friends must have caused. There was magical paint on the walls that spelled out an impressive amount of curse words. A few of them Harry didn't even know before now. There were about half a dozen stink bombs that were starting to make Harry feel nauseous sitting in the corridor, and a quick peek inside Lupin's classroom showed toilet paper all across the desks and bookcases. That must have been Hermione, he decided. Harry'd seen other Muggle kids do something similar on houses and parks before. He wondered where Lupin was and why his friends had decided to make such a mess. Maybe they had all been as unhappy about facing their boggarts as Harry had been. He had no idea. He had been so selfish. He probably needed to talk to them all. Theo first, though. He decided that if his friends weren't in the defense corridor, and they weren't in the Slytherin common room, and it was too early for dinner, they must be in the library. Sure enough, when Harry entered the library, he found his gang clustered around a table in the back of the library, talking quietly. Peeves is on it, Susan was saying just as Harry took his cloak off and walked up to their table. Harry, you're feeling better? Neville asked with a smile. Yeah, he said with as much of a smile as he could muster at the moment. Theo, can I talk to you? He looked around at their friends, in private. Susan gave him an approving sort of look, which made Harry think she knew what he wanted Theo for. Everyone else just looked confused. Sure, Theo said, getting to his feet, but I should warn you it'll take more than wandless magic to convince me to leave Hermione for you. Their friends all snickered as Harry felt his face heat up. You wish, he said with a Draco-level superior sneer. He looked around at his other friends before making a quick decision. Let's have dinner in the Slytherin dorm tonight, yeah. Mavis'll bring us food. We can kick Vince and Greg out and make it just for us. Everyone agreed quickly, their faces going from confused to excited. Harry wasn't going to let his friends feel as miserable as he did. What kind of leader of the gang would he be if he didn't try and fix what fucking Lupin messed up? These were his people, his friends. Lupin and his stupid boggart didn't get to hurt them. Come on, Theo, I've got something cool to show you, Harry gestured towards the library door. Theo kissed Hermione's cheek, grabbed his bag, and dutifully followed alongside Harry out to the corridors. Where are we going? He asked when Harry led him towards the first floor. It's a surprise, Harry grinned. Snape had said to make Theo comfortable, and Harry had the perfect idea. What are we doing here? Theo grimaced at the doorway of the girls' bathroom. Do you want to see the chamber or not? Harry asked, holding Myrtle's bathroom door open for Theo. Yes, Theo breathed, his eyes lighting up with excitement. We can really go down there. Yep. Harry was happy Myrtle didn't seem to be present as he opened the chamber's entrance. He knows Luna likes Myrtle, but the ghost creeped him out a little. "Come on, I'll go first," Harry offered. Harry slid down the dark passage and yelled up, "It's safe." He waited as he heard the bumps and thuds that meant Theo was on his way down. "Oof," Theo said, landing on his bottom. "I can't picture Salazar Slytherin sliding down a giant slide very often." "Probably didn't come down here much, on account of the basilisk and all," Harry snorted. Theo quickly looked around the passageway they landed in. And it's for sure dead, right?" he asked nervously. "Yep," Harry said as he conjured a floating ball of light. "Killed it myself, then Snape took it apart for potion ingredients, didn't he?" "Okay," Theo said, inching slightly closer to Harry. "Lead the way then." Harry led him down the passageway, pointing out where it had caved in. "Looks better now," Theo said. Harry glanced at a pile of boulders that he knew covered Gilderoy Lockhart's body and shrugged. "Snape cleared the rocks so we could get to the basilisk last summer," he said. They approached the giant entrance doors to the chamber, and Harry smirked at Theo before hissing, "Open." Whoa! The doors opened and the two boys stepped into the giant chamber. "Merlin, that's a lot of blood," Theo said, spotting the large dark puddle to the side of the chamber. "Was that all from where you stabbed the basilisk?" "Some of it was from my arm," Harry scowled. Snape looked all over the chamber for any secret diaries or books or anything from Slytherin, but he couldn't find anything. Theo moaned, walking closer to the statue the basilisk had lived in and looking up reverently at it. "This is still amazing, though. I wonder if the other founders had any secret places in the castle." "Maybe," Harry allowed, "but I wanted to talk to you about something." "What's up?" Theo murmured, still looking up at the stone face of the statue. "Try and discuss it in a way they do not even notice it being discussed." "Do you think your parents miss you?" "What?" Theo turned around quickly and gave Harry a wide-eyed look of confusion. "Why would you ask me that?" "I dunno," Harry grimaced. "I just wanted to know if there's anyone outside of Hogwarts that misses you when you're at school." Theo took a couple shuffling steps away from Harry. He looked uncomfortable and nervous all of a sudden. This wasn't going the way Harry had hoped. Harry rolled his wrist while thinking hard. "Give me 2 comfortable chairs like the ones in the library." He focused hard on what Theo's favorite library chairs looked like, and was pleased when identical ones popped into existence facing each other. "Do you want to sit down?" Harry said with what he hoped was a nice smile. Theo glanced at the chairs, then at Harry. "Why?" "I just wanted to talk to you," Harry said, sitting down in the chair closest to him. Theo slowly sat down and looked at Harry curiously. "What's up with the chairs?" he asked. "I thought we were exploring the chamber." "I'm trying to make you comfortable," Harry said. "If you don't like these chairs, I can make different ones." "Did you bring me down here to kill me?" Theo suddenly yelped, jumping up and backing away quickly from Harry. "What? No, of course not. Why would you think that?" Harry asked, genuinely surprised by Theo's question. "You're acting weird," Theo accused. "And you brought me to a bloody chamber, and now you're asking me weird questions and trying to make me comfortable. And that makes you think I want to kill you." Harry honestly wasn't sure how the two things were related. "I just wanted to talk to you." "About what?" Theo asked, still not sitting and sounding really panicked. How's your day?" For some reason that seemed to make Theo flinch, and he took another couple of steps further from the chair Harry made him. Harry huffed. Snape's advice was all wrong. He didn't know how to be subtle and trick someone into talking to him about their feelings, but he was good at making deals. He needed to just talk to Theo the same way he liked to be talked to. "Wanna play a game?" he offered Theo. Theo still looked pale and nervous, but now he looked skeptical as well. "What kind of game?" "Question for a question," Harry said. "Me and Snape play it sometimes. You can ask me anything you want, then I can do the same." He thought of his own usual addendum to the game and hesitated. It wouldn't do him any good to find out about Theo's dad if Theo was allowed to skip questions. "We can vow to never tell anyone what we say down here," Harry said, thinking quickly, "and then we both agree to answer each other's questions. Deal?" Theo still looked skeptical, but he nodded slowly. "I can ask you anything I want?" he asked. "After we take the vow," Harry said, But you have to answer my questions too. That's how the game works. All right. The two boys each swore on their magic to not tell anyone what they talked about in the chamber unless the other person gave them direct permission. Who goes first? Theo asked afterwards, sitting hesitantly across from Harry. Me, Harry said quickly. Why's your boggart your dad? Theo immediately paled at the question. Harry watched as he started tapping his finger on his leg. Tap, tap, tap. I don't want to talk about that, Theo said, his voice quieter than usual. I don't think it's your business. Harry grimaced. He couldn't protect Theo if Theo wouldn't tell him what was going on. How did Snape do this? He tried to think of when he started trusting Snape with his secrets. What if you go first then? Harry said. You can ask me anything. Theo looked at him curiously before leaning forward. Did you kill Lockhart? He whispered. Yep, Harry grinned. He was going to kill me and Draco, wasn't he? Kill or be killed, he quipped. Theo didn't look surprised at all by Harry's secret. He had a smug look in his eyes, as if he had known all along. How'd you do it? He asked, glancing around the chamber quickly. And where's his body? Nope, it's my turn, Harry said. He tried to find a more subtle way of bringing up Theo's life. Who do you live with? Theo tapped his finger on his leg twice before answering quickly. My father. Where's your mum? Tap, tap. My turn, isn't it? Theo said. How'd you kill Lockhart? Put my sword right through his fucking neck, didn't I? Where's your mum? Dead, Theo said shortly. Where? Lockhart's body. Under the boulders up by the entrance, Harry said. How'd she die? Tap, tap, tap. I don't know for sure, Theo said. The official cause of death is organ failure. Why don't you think it's organ failure? Harry asked. He wasn't sure what exactly that was, but he's heard Snape talk about it before and knew it could kill someone. Theo shook his head. You already asked yours, my turn again. He glanced around the room, his eyebrows drawn down in thought. Where were you when you got expelled before you went to Snape's? You told Hermione here and there, but that's not a real answer. Harry grit his teeth and reminded himself that he couldn't save Theo if he didn't answer the questions Theo asked. Even if he really hated it. London, he said curtly, looking at the wall behind Theo's head. Sleepin' in alleys was I. You're worth less than the trash you slept on. Theo nodded, as if he wasn't surprised by that answer either. How exactly do you think that your mum died? Harry asked, carefully wording his question. Tap, tap, tap. I think my father killed her, Theo said quietly. I think he poisoned her. Harry watched as Theo's soft brown eyes flicked around the chamber quickly, the same way Harry's did when he was feeling trapped. Like recognizes like. It's your turn, Harry said calmly. He couldn't make himself sound all soft and gentle like Snape did sometimes. He couldn't offer a shoulder to cry on like Hermione probably could, but he could clear his mind of his anger and stay calm. Theo wouldn't like it if Harry got furious just yet. He could be furious later. And he would be. What was the worst day of your life? Theo asked. Harry wondered if Theo was intentionally asking questions that would make Harry quit the game, so he didn't have to answer Harry's questions anymore. If so, he was going to be disappointed. Harry would expose just a small part of his weakness to someone who was sworn to never reveal it if it meant finding out Theo's secret. Harry grit his teeth and tried to will his heart rate to calm down as he ran his thumbs across the armrests. Day I was expelled, Harry spat. Don't think about it. Why? Theo asked. Harry cocked his head to the side, shook his head at Theo. My turn, he said. Why's your dad your boggart? Tap, 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 tap. I assume it's because the boggart thinks that's what would scare me the most, Theo said. He tried to say it the same way he'd answer a question in class, but Harry heard the quiver in his voice. The quiver that told him he wasn't wrong. Why was the day you were expelled the worst day of your life? Theo asked. Harry focused on the grounding feel of the wooden armrest beneath his thumbs. He could do this. He just had to get through this, and then he'd get Theo away from his dad. All he had to do was talk, and then he'd be able to stop him. Who cares if Theo knew about this secret, when Harry planned on hearing Theo's secret? Theo couldn't tell anyone anyway. My occlumency shields fell, Harry said quietly. I couldn't handle it. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't want to be back on the streets alone. So Harry slowly rolled his sleeves up to show Theo the thick white scars on his wrists. I wanted to be F-free. And then I woke up healed and was still in the fucking alley, so I put up new shields. But then my magic quit listening to me. I couldn't do magic at all, and then I wasn't special anymore. You're not special, you're disgusting. Theo tried to catch Harry's eye, but Harry quickly looked back to the wall behind Theo's head as he rolled his sleeves down and put his palms flat on the armrest again. Why is your dad the thing that scares you the most? Harry asked quickly. Harry watched Theo out of the corner of his eye as he tapped on his leg. He just had to be patient. Patient and calm. Like Snape. Tap, 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 tap. He's mean, Theo admitted quietly. How's he mean? Harry asked just as quietly. It's my turn, Theo said quickly. He cleared his throat and seemed to think for a moment. You said when you got expelled, you didn't want to go back to the streets. How old were you when your relatives actually kicked you out? Worthless whore, freak. Week after I turned 8, Harry said. Does your dad hurt you? Tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 tap. I'm. Theo swallowed heavily, and Harry looked down at his own hands, so Theo didn't have to look at him while he talked. He knew it made it harder. I'm not a good son, Theo said quietly. Harry thought he sounded sad. He wants someone more like you, someone tough and powerful and brilliant, and I'm not good enough, so he gets mad. And then why yeah, yes. Harry glanced up after Theo had been quiet for a long moment. One more question each, Harry offered. Theo nodded and looked up at the ceiling. The muggles Dumbledore put you with, did they? I mean, you too, right? Harry focused on the feeling of the smooth wood grain beneath the pads of his thumbs as he answered. Me too, he confirmed before asking his last question. Do you want me to kill your dad? Theo's eyes quickly flew from the ceiling to meet Harry's. What? He asked. Harry wasn't sure if he really didn't hear him or if he didn't understand him, so he said it again. It's my last question. Do you want me to kill him? Because I will. Harry steadily kept his eyes on Theo's, so Theo knew it wasn't a joke. Harry was going to kill him anyway. But it would probably be better to do it with Theo's permission. Why would you do that? Theo said quietly. I'm not in your G-gang like Ron or Blaise are. Why would you? Harry gripped the armrests tightly as he leaned towards Theo. Because you're mine, you're my friend, and you don't have to live like that, he said intensely. I can fix it, Theo, I swear. I can make it where he never hurts you again, never puts his hands on you again. Tap, 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 tap. Never again. Never, Harry swore. Theo and Harry stared at each other for what felt like at least 3 minutes. The only sound in the chamber was the quiet dripping of the pipes onto the stone floor. Theo swallowed hard. Yes. Okay, Harry agreed calmly. You'll stay here for Christmas and then move in my house this summer, yeah? I can stay with you, Theo asked, looking surprised. Snape won't mind. Course not, Harry said easily, checking the time. It's my house, isn't it? If he gets pissed, we'll just kick him out. We gotta go, we have to meet everyone for dinner soon. Theo looked a little shaky as he stood, but Harry wasn't going to offer him a hand. Theo wouldn't like it. Harry definitely wouldn't if it were him. What are you going to do? Theo asked quietly as Harry banished their chairs. Better if you don't know, innit? Theo looked uncertain, but he shrugged. How do we get back up that slide? He asked instead. I didn't see any stairs. Harry grinned. Mavis. Poppy. Why is Master in the nasty snake chamber again? Mavis wailed immediately. Master is almost dying. Last time he was in the snake chamber. Wanted to show it to Theo, Harry said. Can you take us up to our dorm? Mavis will be happily taking Master and Master's friend to their room where they is belonging. Mavis held a hand out to both of them. Harry grabbed it and smirked at Theo. By the way, you owe me 10 sickles. Had to pay Ron your bet from last year, did I? Harry gave Mavis specific instructions for dinner before the two boys began rearranging the beds around the edges of the room. Well, mostly Harry levitated the beds to the very edges of the room, while Theo stole everyone's pillows and blankets and made a pallet in the middle of the floor. Theo didn't seem much like talking, which was just fine with Harry, so they rearranged everything quietly while they waited for the rest of their group to arrive. A few times Theo would look at Harry, stare at him for a moment, open his mouth as if to say something, then shake his head and go back to what he was doing. Harry just ignored it. If Theo had something to say, he'd say it eventually. He already knew Harry vowed to not repeat anything he told him, so he wasn't sure what else there was to say. Theo finally got around to what it was he wanted to say. "Did you mean it?" Harry didn't need him to explain what he meant. "Yep," Harry said as he rearranged the dishes Mavis dropped off for them. "I'm not a liar." "You're disgusting. You'd really risk everything, for me." Harry hummed. He wasn't really risking anything because he wouldn't get caught. "You're my friend," he said instead. Harry turned around once he was satisfied. Everything was arranged right and ready for the get-together. Theo was sitting on the edge of someone's trunk and giving Harry an awed look. "Once he's gone, can I be in the actual gang, like allies?" Harry beamed at him. "Course you can, same rules as everyone else, yeah." Theo eagerly agreed. When everyone else showed up, Theo gave Hermione a very dramatic kiss that made her turn bright red, and everyone else laugh. Theo seemed happier than Harry had ever seen him before. Free. Harry thought he seemed a bit like he did when he first left Surrey, which probably meant Theo's dad was just as bad as the Dursleys. Something to keep in mind when Harry went to meet him this summer. But for now, Theo was safe. Nobody was going to put their hands on his friend like that ever again, and Harry had to figure out how to fix everyone else. "I saw Lupin's classroom earlier," he said while they were all sitting in a circle on the floor eating biscuits and tarts that Mavis left for dessert, who wrote "inconsiderate asshole" on his door. Everyone snickered and sent a pointed look at Susan. "I have no idea what you mean," she said haughtily. "I am a young woman, I would never write such a thing." Harry snorted. Susan said much worse things daily. "Hermione had the idea with the toilet paper," Ron said with a grin. "Disgusting innit, muggles are crazy." Hermione sputtered, seemingly embarrassed for such a brilliant idea. "Luna and Draco got the stink bombs," she said. Luna and Draco both gave identical shrugs of indifference. "What you do then?" Harry asked Blaise. "Kept a lookout," he said. "Someone had to make sure our professor didn't actually catch us all in the act." "Worth it," Susan muttered darkly. Harry tried to think of a way to bring up what he wanted to talk about, subtly. "I suppose your class did boggits yesterday too then?" Harry asked Hermione and Neville. Which, admittedly, wasn't really all that subtle, but it was effective as everyone got quiet. "We did, and it was horrible," Hermione sniffed. "I don't think they should be allowed to make us show our boggit in front of everyone." "Yeah," Neville agreed. "A lot of people were making fun of Seamus in the tower last night because of his." "What's his then?" Ron grinned. "It was Harry," Neville said with an uncharacteristic smirk. Fred and George about peed themselves laughing. Harry smiled at that. Seamus had said Harry wasn't scary. Clearly he was wrong. "He put you in a dress." "He did what?" Harry looked sharply at Neville. "He put me in a fucking dress." Neville nodded, no longer smirking. "Lupin gave him the idea," Hermione said. "I'm going to kill them both," Harry muttered. Luna grinned over at him. "Or you just get revenge." "Isn't that what I said?" Harry blinked at her. Harry refused to do his. Draco interrupted them. "Told Lupin not a chance." Harry shifted as everyone looked towards him. "He made me do it last night," he admitted. "Said he wouldn't tell anyone what it was, but then he ran and told Snape, didn't he?" Harry was still trying to find a way to get back at him for that. "That's awful," Hermione said. "That had to be like an abuse of power or something." Everyone was looking either outraged or sympathetic, so Harry tried to shift the topic back. "Was yours terrible?" he asked Hermione. She shrugged, but her eyes looked a little sad. "It was Dumbledore. He said I wasn't a witch and I was expelled," she admitted. Harry grimaced in understanding. Finding out you were special was the best feeling in the world. He wouldn't want to be told he wasn't either. "You're not special." "So I burnt his beard off." Everyone howled their heads off in laughter at that. Luna laughed so hard she had tears coming out of her eyes. "My only Merlin, you're mad," Theo said fondly. "I would have paid anything to see it." "Don't give Susan any ideas," Blaise warned him. "She keeps threatening to catch the real Dumbledore on fire anyway." Susan gave them all her best innocent look, even though not a soul believed her. "What was yours?" Harry asked Neville. Neville sighed and his cheeks turned pink at the question. "It was Snape." Snape? Harry was surprised. Yes, Snape had never been very friendly with the Gryffindors, but Neville once blew up a cauldron on purpose in his classroom. How could Snape be his worst fear? "You don't have to explain if you don't want to," Susan said quickly. She gestured to herself and the Slytherin boys, were all in the same class, so we saw each other's. I was afraid when Harry was gone that Snape wouldn't find him, and then none of you would want to be friends anymore," Neville said in a rush. "It's stupid," he mumbled. "It's not stupid," Luna said. "If Harry wasn't here, I wouldn't have met you guys. I think it's a very understandable fear." Neville looked over at her and gave her a small smile. Yes, she said, "everything is better with friends." Harry had no idea how Luna was able to just say everything she was thinking and feeling so confidently. "We'd still be your friend even if Harry wasn't here, mate," Ron said with an easy smile. "For a lion, you're really not so bad." "Thanks," Neville rolled his eyes, but Harry thought he looked pleased all the same. "Mine was a tornado of inferi," Draco said, causing everyone to chuckle again. "I forgot to ask, why is that your fear?" Blaise asked. Draco sent a pointed glare at Harry, who smirked back. "And now that I've seen one, I really want one." Harry smiled broadly in a way that made Draco look immediately nervous. "He's terrifying," Draco wailed. "He's going to take over the world one day." Harry was flattered when nobody contradicted Draco's statement. He honestly didn't know they all believed in him so much. "Your turn," Hermione said to Blaise. "What was your boggart?" "My mother dying," he said after only a split-second pause. Blaise's tone was his usual casual tone of disinterest, but Harry didn't miss the flash of pain in his eyes. Truth be told, he'd felt his own stomach clench when he saw the Contessa's body laying in a coffin in the front of the staff room. He thought about how the 7-time widow might one day have someone looking for revenge. "I'm sorry," Hermione said softly. "That's awful." Blaise raised one shoulder in an elegant shrug before glancing at Ron. "Not as bad as having Harry point a bloody sword in my face, right, Weasley? What on earth could have made you develop such a fear?" Harry rolled his eyes at Blaise's drawling, sarcastic tone, but Ron was surprisingly unflappable. "You saw him with that sword, he's terrifying," he shuddered dramatically. "I'd like to keep my face scar-free, thanks." "You think I'd kill you?" Harry asked him, relieved that it finally came up on its own. He'd been embarrassed, angry, betrayed. When he saw Ron's boggart, Ron was a part of his gang, he was one of his, and the thing he feared most was Harry. It made him feel like a monster right in front of all of his classmates. "You're a monster. A monster, a nobody." Ron looked startled at Harry's question and glanced around the rest of the room. I dunno, probably not," Ron scratched his nose. "But you're always saying you're gonna kill people and, I mean, if I make you mad or something, do you think you'd kill me?" Harry tried to consider it rationally, but this was the Ginny situation all over again. "You don't trust me," he said. "You didn't trust me to save Ginny, and you don't trust me to not kill you." "Harry, that's not what he's..." Harry ignored Draco as he stared at Ron. "Do you think I'm a monster?" "What? No," Ron denied it quickly. "You're not a monster, mate, you're just..." "Intense," Blaise supplied helpfully. "You can be intense." "Your worst fear was me killing you with my sword," Harry said to Ron flatly. "I just don't get it." "I'm a bad friend, okay," Ron said, his ears glowing red. "I'm a crap friend. I'm not interesting or rich or powerful or any good at school. I can't talk to Nargles, and you don't like any of us as much as you do Susan, so I'm just here. I don't even know why you let me in the gang, and eventually you'll realize I'm worthless and kick me out. Or you said that if I mess up, you're done with me, so I figure I'll mess up and you'll kick me out. You're the worst leader in the world." "You're not worthless," Harry said. "You were the first person on the train to talk to me, weren't you? Didn't even know I was famous or nothing. You're not worthless." "You're worthless." "Cheers then, mate," Ron said with a tentative smile, his ears still glowing red. "You're not worthless either, Harry," Luna whispered beside him, somehow guessing at his thoughts once again. Harry gave her an appreciative look. It was a nice sentiment, even if she was wrong. Nobody talked for a moment, and the air seemed awkward. "Anyone want to bet on Harry's boggart?" Blaise said, effectively breaking the uncomfortable silence. "Harry's the scariest thing in any room," Theo said, "so it's probably something ridiculous like baby measles." "Cupcakes," Blaise said with a grin. "Probably scabbers," Ron laughed. "Long essays," Hermione said. "I think it's a proper haircut," Draco said with an exasperated look at Harry's hair. "Oi, leave my hair out of this," Harry said in faux outrage. "What did it ever do to you?" Everyone looked expectantly at Harry. "It was a grim," he lied baldly. "Guess I'm either scared of Trelawney or dying, I'm not sure which yet." Everyone chuckled at that except for Luna and Susan, who Harry assumed were the only ones who saw through his lie, but were too polite to point it out. "Susan, was Harry right?" said Neville. Susan looked over towards the Gryffindor boy, surprise clear on her face. "How do you know?" she asked. "If anyone's been talking about it, I swear." "Nobody told me," Neville said hastily. I mean you two aren't really scared of anything properly scary, so I just assumed." "Harry's my family," Susan said firmly, "and he's always running off in dangerous adventures without me," she hissed, glaring at Harry. "Of course I'd be scared he'll die." Harry held Susan's hand tightly. He had been embarrassed by Ron's boggart, amused by Parkinson's, pleased with Macmillan's boggart, but Susan's was different. It had been a shock to look at himself lying on the ground, dead. And now he couldn't get it out of his head. It was taking up almost as much space as the Snape boggart. Thankfully, it was much quieter, but it had a different kind of draw to it. Everyone started to break off from the group. Ron and Blaise were playing cards, while Theo and Hermione were talking quietly by his bed. Luna and Neville were talking with Draco, and stacking plates up on the trunks they used as an impromptu table. "It's getting late," Hermione eventually said, checking the time with a little frown. "We should get going so we don't get caught past curfew." "Or you guys could stay here," Draco suggested with a grin. "We could have a huge slumber party." Is that allowed?" Neville asked, looking towards Hermione and Theo. "No," Theo said. "The rulebook says every student must sleep in their own assigned bed every night at Hogwarts." "Fuck it," Harry said. "Why not? I can put a ward up, we'll toss Vince and Greg's stuff out to the sofas, and you guys can sleep here tonight." "There aren't enough beds," Hermione said. "There's 9 of us and only 7 beds." "Guess you'll have to share with Theo," Blaise winked. Harry hastily jumped in as both Hermione and Theo blushed furiously. "Oh, we can all sleep on the floor." "Yay," Susan squealed excitedly. "Let's do it." Draco and Harry started tossing sleeping garments out of their trunks to the girls. Luna decided she'd wear Harry's since he was the closest to her size. Theo firmly gave Susan Draco's when he offered them to Hermione and gave her a pair of his own pajamas. "Harry can shrink them so they fit," he said. Neville rolled his eyes at the girls and stole a pair out of Ron's trunk. While the girls went to change, Ron and Blaise dragged Vince and Greg's blankets down to the sofa and came back up snorting with laughter. Greg started to complain and Blaise said. Ron broke off, his laughter overcoming him apparently. "Told him the heir of Slytherin requires absolute privacy for the night," Blaise said in a pompous tone, only belied by his eyes sparkling with mirth. "They're too dumb to even question why we were still up here then." The boys all laughed about that, and then laughed even harder when the girls got back and looked like they were drowning in their borrowed clothes before Harry shrunk them to their size. Except for Luna, Harry frowned to see his clothes were only slightly too big on her. "We didn't think this through," Ron muttered as they tried to find a way to arrange the blankets on the floor so everyone had space to sleep. "What if we give the girls the beds and the rest of us kip on the floor?" Neville suggested. "Chivalrous Gryffindor," Blaise said. "Fine, the girls get the beds and the rest of us will sleep down here, on the floor," he grimaced. "I'll stay on the floor," Susan said, sliding a pillow over beside Harry's. "Blaise, you can have your own bed." Everyone bade each other a good night as they all shifted around in their makeshift beds getting comfortable. As everyone started dropping off into sleep, snoring or mumbling as they slept, Harry laid on his back and tried not to get caught up in his own thoughts. He'd fixed Theo's fear, or he will. He didn't know if Ron trusted him or not, but he didn't think Ron was worthless. "Not like me." All that was left was Susan. Harry turned his head slightly and saw Susan was still awake beside him. "I'm sorry I'm your boggart," Harry said quietly, so as to not wake their other friends. Susan propped herself up on her elbow and scrunched her nose up as she looked at him. "Why are you sorry? It's not your fault," she said. Harry stared up at the ceiling. "I dunno, I can't live forever. Then you'll be sad, right? So I'm sorry." Susan scooted closer to him, laid flat on her back, and grabbed his hand in hers. "Nobody lives forever," she said softly. "You and Auntie Amelia were my boggart because you guys are the most important people in the world to me. Just live as long as you can, okay? I love you, Harry." Harry felt his throat swell up and had to swallow a few times to get it to work right. "Nobody cares about you." You do," he whispered. Susan squeezed his hand in hers. "Of course I do, stupid." They laid together in a comfortable silence for a long while. Harry kept replaying her words back in his head. "I love you, Harry. I love you, Harry. I love you." "No one's ever said that to me before," he admitted quietly. "I don't know what to say." Susan gave his hand another reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to say anything." Monday rolled around and Harry still felt tired and cold, but he told himself he had to stick it out. So he did. He unenthusiastically drug himself to classes, caught the snitch during the newly restarted Quidditch practices, forced himself to talk with his friends during meals, worked on his homework. But at night, he laid in his bed and stared up at the canopy just thinking. "People think death is easy. You're worthless." He had to stick it out until summer. Who would keep Theo's dad from putting his hands on him if Harry did? He promised he'd take care of it, and he would. So he just laid in his bed, staring up at the canopy, thinking, "I love you, Harry. You're not worthless either, Harry." By Wednesday, Harry felt like miserable. He was so tired, and he had both care of magical creatures and defense, so it was probably going to be a terrible day. Snape had apparently talked to Hagrid. Harry hopes he did a lot of yelling and wished he could have seen it, because their class today was a rather tame lesson on feeding flobberworms. "You just had to complain, didn't you?" Draco grumbled as he forced lettuce down the flobberworm's mouth. After lunch, Harry drug himself behind his friends to the defense classroom. He had successfully dodged Lupin ever since Friday's detention. Luckily, his tactics from Lockhart last year gave him quite a bit of practice. He wondered if they'd ever have a defense teacher that wasn't terrible. He actually missed Quirrell. At least he had been good for a fast-paced duel. His outlook on the day brightened considerately when Lupin's door still had "inconsiderate asshole" sprawled across it in glowing red paint. "Sorry about that," Lupin said cheerfully as the students arrived. "It should be gone in another day or so." "It won't, it lasts a whole week," Susan whispered in Harry's ear. "Who did that?" Justin Finch-Fletchy said, sounding scandalized. "Probably just an older student hazing the new professor," Lupin said, seemingly unbothered by it. "I seem to be being pranked." "Good thing you like pranks then, right, sir?" Harry smiled sharply at Lupin. "Everyone likes pranks when they're young," Lupin said, giving Harry an odd look, "but people do eventually grow up." Harry thought of Snape. Snape, who spent 7 years being tormented by a group of blokes who thought he wasn't worth being their friend. They never even gave him a chance to see what a decent person he was. They tried to kill him, in fact. And where would Harry be if they had? "Do you think they ever feel bad, though?" he asked sharply, his exhaustion receding in favor of anger. "Do you think they feel bad, or do you think they just sit around thinking they're a good person, because at least they grew up? Because I think if they didn't try and make up for it, then they didn't really change, did they, sir?" The whole class watched with bated breath as Lupin stared at Harry's furious face. "That's probably a discussion for another day," Lupin eventually said, blinking and looking around at the rest of the class. "For now, everyone take your seats, please." Harry threw himself in a chair in the back corner of the room, now doubly furious. "Just ignore him," Draco murmured from his seat in front of Harry. "He'll wish Harry ignored him," Ron snorted. Harry decided to ignore both of them, and slammed his defense text on his desk, and toned out Lupin's voice droning on about red caps in favor of breathing deeply and clearing his mind. Susan gave him a sympathetic look and grabbed his notebook while Lupin talked. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Harry grimaced and picked up his own quill. "Who says I'm not?" Susan rolled her eyes. "The bag's under your eyes, stupid." "I don't feel good, think I'm sick." "You're a bad liar." Hope that's not true, might be hard to explain a few things. Susan snorted out loud, drawing a look from Lupin. They both glared at him until he went back to his lesson, occasionally shooting thoughtful looks at their table. Get a potion from Snape. I don't want to. Why? Because then he'll know I'm not sleeping. Are you sick? Harry thought about it before he answered. He didn't feel sick. He felt cold, like he had on the train. Think it's the Dementors. Susan made a face. We need to find Black, then Dumbledore has to get rid of the Dementors, right? Who knows, hopefully though. How do we find him? Harry shrugged. I'm sure he'll find me, crazy people usually do. Susan laughed out loud at that. She was terrible at keeping a blank face. Something funny, Susan? Lupin asked cheerfully from the front of the class. No sir, Susan said, folding her hands on the table primly. Would you mind telling me how you would stop a red cap from attacking you then? Lupin asked. Susan glanced over at Harry and back at Lupin again. I'm not sure, sir, she said. Lupin looked at Harry, who glared back at him. Harry, any ideas? Harry looked at the red cap in a cage on Lupin's desk and shrugged. Easy, Harry pulled on his magic and pointed his finger at the cage. Burn it! The classroom yelped and Lupin jumped away from his desk as the little red-eyed creature in the cage suddenly burst into flames and began shrieking. Agumenti, Lupin said, putting the fire out with a flick of his wand. Lupin looked up at Harry and looked like he'd never seen him properly before. Why did you do that? He asked across the silent classroom. You said how would I stop it from attacking me, and that's what I'd do, Harry said. Lupin kept staring as the bell rang. I'd like everyone to summarize the section on red caps and read ahead about Kappas. We'll start them on Friday. Harry, stay behind please. Want me to stay? Susan murmured. Nah, go to the library, I'll see you in a bit, Harry muttered back. He hated Lupin, hated that he said he wouldn't tell anyone his boggart and did it anyway, hated that he made him see it to start with, hated him for what he did to Snape when they were students. Harry hated him. He wasn't scared of him. After the students filtered out, Harry's friends either grimacing in sympathy at him or scowling at Lupin as they went, Lupin came to the back of the classroom. He stopped and hesitated when he reached Harry's table and instead sat in Draco's abandoned seat, leaving the table between them. I think we got off on the wrong foot, he said. I definitely didn't help matters on Friday, did I? Lupin chuckled in a self-conscious sounding way. I'm sorry about that, by the way. About what? Harry asked, specifically. Lupin looked surprised at Harry's continued cold tone. I'm sorry for pushing you into seeing your boggart. I thought it would be good for you to face it. And you do need to learn to the spell, but I didn't need to push you into it. So you're not sorry for telling Snape after you promised to keep it to yourself? Harry sneered. Brill, just checking. Lupin looked uncomfortable. Severus told you about that. We don't have secrets from each other, Harry said. I was worried, Lupin said softly. I was just worried that Severus was treating you unkindly at home. So you thought going to him and telling him what my boggart was would somehow help if he was? Harry snorted derisively. Guess you were a Gryffindor, huh? Lupin recoiled back in his chair at the venom in Harry's voice. You're right, I didn't think that through, did I? Lupin frowned and rubbed the back of his neck. I suppose that's another apology I owe you then. Did you apologize to Snape? Lupin gave Harry another odd look. He looked like Harry was a complex creature he couldn't figure out. Good. What do you believe I owe Severus an apology for? He asked slowly. The genuine curiosity in Lupin's voice surprised Harry. What do you owe Snape an apology for? He said incredulously. Should I make a list? Lupin just blinked at him, and Harry felt his anger starting to spiral. Did you ever apologize for bullying him and treating him like dirt in school? He spat. How about when your buddy Black tried to kill him? No, then you went and accused him of treating me unkindly, didn't you? Did you apologize when he told you you were wrong? Snape's the only bloody adult that's ever treated me kindly. Harry got to his feet and slung his bag over his shoulder, glaring darkly at the shock on Lupin's scarred face. If there's nothing else, Professor. Harry, I'm sorry, Lupin said weakly. I had no idea Severus meant so much to you. Words don't mean anything, Harry quipped. and it's real chivalrous of you to apologize to me but not Snape. All daring nerve when you're accusing people of things but a coward when it comes to making up for what you did, huh? Harry gave him one last look of disdain before storming out to the now empty corridor. Well, no, not empty. What are you doing? Harry asked Blaise, who was leaning against the corridor wall. Listening to you tear Lupin to shreds. I was hoping there would be blood involved, he said easily as he straightened himself up. Shall we make our way to the library? Go ahead, Harry waved him off, still furious with Lupin and his damn worthless apologies. Tell everyone I'm going for a walk. Want me to go with? Blaise offered. Harry pulled his cloak out of his bag and threw it over himself. No, he said shortly, I'll see you later. Harry quietly slipped through the corridors, avoiding the groups of students who were unaware of his presence until he reached the entrance. He felt like he could clear his mind better when he was outside. Probably a side effect of spending so much of his life outdoors. He felt the Dementors chill more out here on the grounds, but it was worth it. He could storm over to the edge of the forest and destroy a tree or something. He'd picture Lupin's face as he did it. He approached the edge of the forest and stopped when he saw the large, dark dog. Just a dog. Not a Grim. Hey boy, Harry called, taking his cloak off. Are you following me? The dog was hiding around the edge of the forest and sniffled around as Harry approached. Harry thought it looked just like the one he'd seen with Susan in Nocturne Alley over the summer. It was the biggest dog Harry had ever seen in his life. What are you doing? Harry murmured. Boys, you look hungry. The dog whined and pushed Harry's leg with his nose. Harry called for Mavis and asked him to bring the dog a steak. Harry smiled when the dog did a little ridiculous happy dance before it ate it. Harry sat and leaned against the tree trunk and watched the dog tear apart its meal. Poor thing was probably starving. After it was done, it slowly came over to Harry and gently laid its heavy head on his legs. Most dogs don't like me, Harry said quietly. Hagrid said his dumb dog is a good judge o' character, and that dog growls at me every time it sees me. This dog just whined and nudged at Harry's hand. You're nighty. He laughed, scratching behind the dog's ears. I was gonna tear up a tree, make myself less mad, you know. He scratched the dog's ears and looked into the forest. I hate Lupin. I hate these Dementors. I hate Sirius Black. The dog picked its head up and looked up at Harry. I'm going to kill him, he swore, as soon as I find him. I could have had a totally different life if it weren't for him, you know. He ruined it. The dog slowly sat its head back in Harry's lap and licked his hand. Gross, Harry laughed. Don't lick me. Harry and the dog sat there in silence for a while, watching the sun get lower. Potter. Harry jumped up, startling the dog off his lap, and turned to see Snape walking quickly towards him. Oh, Snape, he slumped down into a more relaxed position. What are you doing? What are you doing, you foolish brat? Snape said. It's almost dark out and you're on the edge of the lawn. Are you looking to lose a fight with a Dementor? Harry grimaced at the reminder. Sorry, sir, Harry muttered. I lost track of time. Snape looked closely at him, doing that weird X-ray look he did sometimes. When did you last sleep through the night? Harry shrugged. Through the night, I dunno. Snape sighed. Here. He pulled a potion vial out of his cloak pocket and offered it to Harry. You need to sleep, and before you ask, the only thing I ask in return is you avoid getting so close to the edges of the grounds in the future. It would be a shame for a Dementor to suck out your soul before you've finished your reign of terror, he said dryly. Harry grinned and put the potion in his own pocket. If Luna always knew the right thing to say, Snape always knew the right thing to do. Cheers, sir. Snape gave him an exasperated look, even though his eyes were soft and warm. Come along, I doubt your clique will even know how to eat without your majesty in attendance. Harry snorted and started to follow him before he remembered the dog. Oh, Snape, that dog, here. Harry turned to call for the dog and frowned to see it was gone. What dog? Snape asked slowly, giving Harry a look. Don't look at me like that, Harry scowled. That black dog from Nocturne Alley was here. You can ask Mavis, he brought him a steak. I'm gonna see if it wants to go home with us this summer. Delightful, Snape drawled, gesturing for Harry to follow him towards the castle. What I have always wanted was a moody teenaged ward, an elf that utilizes a barter system, a neurotic bird, and a flea-bitten dog in our home. Harry smirked as he considered Snape's expression when Theo shows up this summer. He'd need to have his camera ready. As the two wizards trekked back to the castle, a large black dog hunched behind a tree on the edge of the lawn, snarling under its breath. A little